The silence of a dying world is not silence at all. It is a chorus of signals that have stopped, a symphony of absence. For the 2 million human souls on Veridian 7, the silence began as a whisper, a strange latency in the sublight comms relays, a flicker in the data streams that connected their isolated paradise to the rest of the galaxy. It was a problem for the engineers, a curiosity for the network administrators. Then, the whisper became a cough. The first case was logged in the capital city of Oakhaven as an atypical respiratory infection, aggressive and resistant to standard nanotreatments. Within a week, there were 1,000 cases. Within 2, 100,000. The cough became a scream, a raw, desperate plea for help broadcast on all frequencies. A digital torrent of corrupted medical data, fragmented video logs of overflowing hospitals, and the final, garbled words of Governor Eva Rostova before the planetary comms network went dark. The message, pieced together by Terran Federation Signal Corps, was not a request for warships or soldiers, but for doctors. It was a plea for medicine, for virologists, for anyone who could stop the unstoppable plague that was dissolving their world from the inside out. The scream, like all screams, eventually faded, and then there was only the silence. This silence was the primary topic of discussion in the gleaming halls of the Galactic Concordance on the Citadel. Here, hundreds of species debated the minutiae of interstellar law under the watchful holographic eyes of the founders. Humanity's ambassador, Anya Sharma, stood before the assembly, her face a mask of strained composure. On the central dais, the fragmented data from Veridian 7 played on a loop a doctor's face, gaunt and sweating, describing cellular necrosis with a trembling voice. A thermal scan of Oakhaven showing millions of life signs dimming like snuffed candles. The final, static-choked plea for help. "The biopurity accords are clear," chirped the Vex Consortium's delegate, a slender, insectoid being whose species viewed genetic manipulation as the highest form of art. Its multifaceted eyes showed no emotion as it gestured a delicate limb toward the grim display. An unknown biological agent, a Class 7 outbreak at minimum. The system was quarantined by automatic concordance statute the moment the signal was verified. It is tragic, deeply so, but the law exists to prevent such a contagion from spreading. We cannot risk interstellar pandemic for one isolated colony. Anya clenched her fists, her knuckles white. The law exists to protect lives. Delegate, not to sign death warrants. 2 million of my people are dying. They didn't ask for an armada. They asked for a hospital ship. They asked for our help. A low murmur rippled through the assembly. The Sithari delegate, a hulking ursine creature whose species valued tradition and precedent above all else, rose slowly. "Oh, and we would offer it, Ambassador, if we could. But the accords are absolute. No vessel may enter or exit a Class 7 quarantine zone until the contagion has burned itself out and the system is declared sterile by a hazard assessment drone. It is the only way to ensure the safety of the greater galactic community." The Vex delegate clicked its mandibles in agreement. The Sithari speaks wisely. To breach the quarantine would be an act of galactic-scale recklessness. The Terran Federation must accept this unfortunate loss and honor the laws that protect us all. Anya stared at the faces around her, some sympathetic but resigned, others cold and indifferent, a few barely concealing their satisfaction at humanity's plight. She saw no help here. They weren't debating a rescue, they were officiating a funeral from a safe distance. "So you will do nothing?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "You will sit here in your sterile hall and listen to the silence of 2 million graves and call it wisdom." The presiding arbiter, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with a soft Blue light. The decision is not ours to make. Ambassador Sharma. The Accords are law. The Veridian system is under inviolable quarantine. The Concordance offers its deepest condolences to the Terran Federation. The finality of the statement hung in the air, cold and absolute. The galaxy had turned its back. On Earth, the news was met with a tidal wave of grief and fury. Memorials sprang up overnight in every major city. The public demanded action, but the Terran Federation government, in a series of solemn public addresses, announced its reluctant compliance with the Concordance's decree. President Alan Graves, his face etched with sorrow, spoke of their duty to the galactic community, of the terrible price of interstellar law. It was a masterful performance of statesmanship and restraint. It was also a complete and utter lie. In a shielded, subterranean bunker deep beneath the Siberian tundra, the real response was taking shape. Dr. Eris Thorne watched the president's speech on a wall screen, his expression unreadable. For 20 years, Eris had been a senior field commander in the Xenobiological Emergency Response Corps, or XERC. Publicly, XERC was the Federation's premier medical and scientific research body, a humanitarian organization dedicated to curing disease and providing aid across human space. In reality, that was only half its mandate. Eris was a doctor, a man who had taken an oath to preserve life, but he was also a soldier trained in the grim calculus of biological warfare. He knew that some diseases couldn't be cured, only cauterized. The door to the sterile briefing room hissed open, and Fleet Admiral Eva Rostova entered. She was a ghost, a name spoken only in the highest echelons of Terran intelligence. She commanded a fleet that didn't exist, to fight wars the public never knew were happening. "They're dead, Eris," she said without preamble, her voice like gravel. "The last life signs from the colony flatlined 6 hours ago. The Vex plague was efficient. Complete cellular breakdown in under 72 hours. It leaves nothing behind but organic slurry." Eris felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, but his face remained a blank slate. "Then we are no longer on a rescue mission." Rostova shook her head. "We never were. This is a retrieval and retribution mission. Veridian 7 is a crime scene, and you are our chief investigator. Your objective is to get down there, bypass the Vex's genetic scrambling, and secure a pure sample of the original contagion. Find their signature, find who made it, and give that information to me." She gestured to the screen, which now showed the schematics of a colossal vessel. "You will be deploying aboard the XHS Solace. She's the newest Aegis-class medship. Full biocontainment suites, quantum labs, everything you need to dissect this plague and trace it to its source." The Aegis-class ships were humanity's greatest secret, vessels that masqueraded as simple hospital ships, but were in fact mobile fortresses of science and medicine, capable of operating for years in the most hostile environments imaginable. "The Concordance has the system quarantined," Eris stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "They'll have sensor buoys ringing the entire sector. Any ship making a jump into that system will trigger every alarm from here to the Citadel." Rostova's lips curled into a semblance of a smile. It was not a pleasant sight. "The Concordance believes we are adhering to their laws. They believe we are weak, sentimental, and predictable. Let them. The Solace will not be going alone." She keyed in a new command, and the schematic of the medship was joined by a dozen others. They were warships, but unlike any Ares had ever seen. They were sleek, black, and utterly menacing, designed without a single thought given to aesthetics or crew comfort. They were pure function, pure lethality. "This is Task Force Cerberus," Rostova said, her voice dropping to a low growl. The Black Fleet. They're ghosts. No transponders, no official registries. They are equipped with the latest generation of stealth drives and ECM suites. They will punch a hole through the Concordance quarantine network, and you will slip through in their shadow. Once you are in system, they will form a perimeter and ensure that nothing and no one interferes with your work. A new file appeared on Eris's personal data pad. It was a command transfer, assigning him as the ranking officer for the Veridian mission, with tactical oversight of both the Solace and its escort. He was a doctor being given command of a battle group. He looked up at Rostova. And what is Cerberus's directive once I have the sample? The Admiral's eyes were as cold and dark as the void between stars. Once you have identified the creators of the Veridian Plague, Commander Jorik Kale of the warship Vengeance will be given their coordinates. His orders are simple to administer the cure. Eris felt a chill crawl down his spine. He knew exactly what she meant. The cure for a biological weapon was not an antidote. It was the complete and utter eradication of the weapon's creators. This was the other half of Exarch's mandate, the one whispered about in dark corners of the intelligence community, the Aegis Mandate. It was a protocol born from a forgotten age of desperation, a time when humanity was young and weak, and had learned the hard way that some threats could not be reasoned with or deterred. The mandate was simple. An attack on the human genome was an act of existential war, to be answered not with diplomacy or sanctions, but with surgical, overwhelming, and absolute annihilation. First, do no harm. Then, eliminate the source of the harm. Days later, in a dark sector of the Sol system, far from the prying eyes of Concordance listening posts, the XHS Solace hung silently in the void. It was a vessel of contradictions, its pristine white hull marked with the universal symbols of aid and healing. Yet it moved with a purpose that felt anything but peaceful. On the bridge, Eris Thorne stood beside the ship's captain, a veteran ex-Irqi officer named Lena Petrova. Before them, the starfield on the main view screen shimmered and distorted as 12 shadows detached themselves from the darkness. Task Force Cerberus. They didn't hail. They didn't communicate. They simply appeared, moving into a protective formation around the massive hospital ship like wolves circling their den mother. Petrova nodded toward the lead ship, a jagged arrowhead of a vessel that seemed to absorb the light around it. That's the Vengeance, Commander Kale's flagship. Eris had met Kale just once, via a tightly encrypted comms channel. The man was Rostova's protege, a product of the same clandestine programs that had birthed the Black Fleet. His words had been few, his tone utterly devoid of emotion. He was not a soldier, he was a weapon, and Aris was the one who would aim him. A quiet chime echoed across the bridge. "Sir," the navigation officer announced, "we've received the jump coordinates from the Vengeance. They've found a blind spot in the quarantine grid. The window will be open for exactly 12 seconds. Eris looked at Petrova, who gave him a grim, determined nod. He had his orders. He was a doctor on his way to perform an autopsy on a dead planet, to find the murderers who had killed it, and escorting him was the executioner. "Take us in," Eris commanded, his voice steady. "Let's not keep the bastards waiting." The Solace and its ghost fleet aligned themselves, and in the corridors of the midship, teams of scientists and soldiers in sealed hazard suits stood ready. In the cold, silent warships of Task Force Cerberus, weapon systems were charged, and crews waited with stoic patience. To the galaxy, it was a day like any other. The Terran Federation mourned its dead. The Concordance continued its endless debates, and the Veridian system remained a silent, quarantined tomb. They were all wrong. The silence was about to be broken. Humanity was not mourning its dead. It was coming to avenge them. With a flash of quantum energy that was carefully contained and scrubbed of any detectable signature, the fleet vanished, embarking on a mission of vengeance that the galaxy was not prepared for. A mission to remind the stars that while humanity's compassion was a gift, its wrath was a promise. The transition from the non-space of quantum travel to the material universe was jarringly gentle. One moment, the XHS Solace and its 12 shadows were nowhere. The next, they were hanging in the high orbit of a dead world. Before them, Veridian 7 floated like a diseased eyeball in the black socket of space. What should have been a vibrant marble of blue oceans and green continents was now a sickly, bruised sphere, shrouded in a greasy, ochre-colored haze. The sprawling city lights that should have glittered on its dark side were absent. There was no electronic chatter, no stray commercial broadcasts, no automated shipping pings. The silence that had been a concept debated in the sterile halls of the Concordance was now a physical presence, a crushing weight that pressed in on the hull of the ship. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Commander Jorik Kale watched the dead world with an unnerving stillness. His fleet, the ghosts of Task Force Cerberus, had already begun their work. Without a word of communication, they broke formation and spread out, their stealth drives rendering them invisible to all but each other. They moved toward the Concordance quarantine buoys that formed a perimeter around the system, not with the intent to destroy them, but to disable them with surgical precision, blinding the galaxy to their presence. A single, encrypted line of text appeared on Eris Thorne's command console aboard the Solace. It was from KL. "Perimeter secure. The system is yours, Doctor." Eris gave a curt nod to Captain Petrova. "Bring us into a low synchronous orbit over Oakhaven. I want our sensor arrays to start mapping the decay patterns. Get me a full atmospheric and radiological profile. I need to know what we're walking into." The shuttle bay of the Solace was a study in controlled tension. The air hummed with the sound of power conduits and life support systems. Before Eris stood his ground team 6 soldiers from the XR security detail, led by Major Kira Valerius, a woman whose calm demeanor did little to hide the hardened lethality in her eyes, and 2 scientists, chief among them being Dr. Ilara Vance, a brilliant but visibly nervous geneticist barely out of her 20s. Whose mind for viral code was legendary within the Corps. They were all encased in the Chimera environmental suits, state-of-the-art hazardous environment armor that made them look less like a scientific team and more like specters of a forgotten war. The suits were a marvel of Terran engineering, completely sealed systems with their own recycled air, and nutrient paste, capable of withstanding extreme temperatures, radiation, and, most importantly, Class 10 biological threats. Each helmet was a sophisticated command interface, projecting a constant stream of biometric and environmental data onto the inside of the faceplate. "Listen up!" Eris's voice was calm and even, broadcast over their private comm channel. "Our mission is simple. Get in, find a viable, re-scrambled sample of the pathogen, and get out. We are not here to be heroes. We are not here to mourn. We are here to gather evidence. We land at the designated site, the Oakhaven Central Plaza site, and proceed directly to Oakhaven General Hospital. The last coherent medical data came from there, which makes it our most likely source for an uncontaminated sample. Dr. Vance will lead the search for the pathogen source code. Major Valerius, your team has one job: keep us alive. Standard protocols are in effect. Shoot anything that isn't us and doesn't fall over from a stiff breeze. Questions. Silence. They knew their roles. They were professionals, the best at what they did. But the sight of the dying world on the monitors around them was a heavy burden on even the most disciplined mind. "All right," Eris said, sealing his own helmet with a soft hiss. "Let's go to work." Their dropship, the Stiletto, was a needle-nosed craft designed for rapid, low observable atmospheric insertion. It detached from the Solace with a gentle push, a silent scalpel descending toward a cancerous organ. As they breached the upper atmosphere, the turbulence began. The ship shuddered, not from atmospheric friction, yet from the thick, chemical soup that had replaced Veridian's breathable air. Through the reinforced viewports, they saw a landscape straight from a nightmare. The verdant forests and plains were gone, replaced by a glistening, gelatinous carpet of decomposed organic matter that shimmered under the faint light of the system's sun. The cities were not ruins of fire and rubble. They were worse. Buildings made of steel and concrete sagged and slumped as if they were made of wax, their foundations dissolved by the voracious, matter-consuming plague. Oakhaven was a silent, skeletal wreck. The Stiletto settled into the central plaza with a muffled thud, its landing struts sinking several inches into the viscous film that coated everything. The ramp lowered with a hydraulic sigh, revealing a scene of profound and unsettling stillness. The air was thick with the sweet, cloying stench of chemical decay, a smell that their suits' scrubbers thankfully filtered out. What used to be fountains and gardens was now just a series of shallow, bubbling pools of organic slurry, ankle-deep in the remnants of 2 million lives. The team moved out, their heavy boots making soft, squelching sounds in the eerie silence. Major Valerius's soldiers fanned out, their pulse rifles sweeping the grotesque landscape, though there was nothing to aim at. Life, in all its forms, was simply gone. Oakhaven General Hospital loomed over them, a monument to a battle that had been lost before it had even begun. Its glass facade was opaque, coated in a thick layer of brownish residue. The emergency bay doors were jammed half open, a silent testament to the chaos of the final days. They entered through the breach, their helmet lights cutting through the oppressive gloom. The inside was a tableau of horror preserved in amber. Gurneys were overturned, medical equipment was scattered, and everything, the floors, the walls, the ceiling was coated in the same grotesque film. They were not walking through a building. They were wading through a tomb's digestive tract. "Vance, what are your readings?" Eris's voice was a low murmur in their ears. "The pathogen's residual energy signature is everywhere, Doctor," she replied, her voice trembling slightly as she monitored the sensor suite on her wrist. "But it's all corrupted, just as we expected. The genetic kill switch has done its work. It's like trying to read a book after someone's burned every page. We need the original, the source." They moved deeper, through abandoned wards and operating theaters. The only sound, the rhythmic hiss of their rebreathers and the soft squelch of their boots. The silence was a living thing here, filled with the ghosts of screams they would never hear. They reached the hospital's primary research wing, a state-of-the-art facility that had been Veridian's pride. It was here they found the first clue that this was more than a random outbreak. Behind a series of reinforced blast doors marked quarantine, they found a laboratory that was far too advanced for a civilian colony hospital. "This equipment, it's not Federation standard," Vance whispered, her light playing over strange, insectoid-looking gene sequencers and containment pods. "The design philosophy, it's Vex. I'm certain of it." Eris ran a gloved hand over a control panel, his eyes narrowing. "The Vex Consortium, What would their technology be doing in a human colony hospital? Before anyone could answer, Major Valerius's voice cut through the channel, sharp and urgent. "Sir, you need to see this." She was standing before a wall at the back of the lab. It looked solid, but a faint seam was visible upon close inspection. It was a hidden door. Eris examined the access panel. It was alien, the markings intricate and non-human, but it was also damaged. A clear scorch mark marring its surface. The lock mechanism fused and broken. "Someone forced this open," Valeria stated, her rifle at the ready. From the inside, with a concerted effort from two of her soldiers, they managed to pry the heavy door open. The air that puffed out was colder, carrying a different kind of silence, one that felt older, more deliberate, and the room beyond was a place of nightmares. It was a Vex military research lab, hidden deep beneath the human hospital. In the center of the room was a massive, shattered stasis pod, its crystalline walls cracked and stained from within. Around it were smaller pods, some containing the twisted remains of alien creatures. Others were human-sized. This wasn't a hospital lab. It was a weapons development facility, when Veridian 7 had been the testing ground. "My God," Vance breathed, stumbling back a step. "They were developing it here. They tested it on the colonists." "No," Eris said, his voice a low, dangerous growl as he examined the central pod's control interface. "The release wasn't from here. This pod was designed for containment, not dispersal. This was their control sample." "The main culture vats are over there." He pointed to a series of large, cylindrical tanks against the far wall. "Someone from inside this lab tried to stop it. They forced their way out, probably to try and warn the governor. But it was too late." Hope surged through the grim discovery. If this was the main lab, then a pure sample had to be here. Vance rushed to the culture vats, her earlier fear replaced by a feverish intensity. I interfaced her suit's diagnostic tools with the vat controls. Most of them have been purged. A remote command was sent to sterilize the evidence. But one of them is showing a power failure in its stasis field. The sample might still be viable. As Vance worked frantically to extract the sample, a series of soft clicks echoed through the hidden lab. Red emergency lights began to pulse, bathing the room in a bloody glow. "What was that?" Valerius barked, her squad forming a tight circle, weapons raised. "I don't know," Vance said, her voice strained with concentration. "When I accessed the stasis controls, I must have tripped a secondary security protocol." The heavy door they had pried open slammed shut with the force and finality of a tomb being sealed. On the wall, previously dormant panels slid open, revealing sleek, insectoid drones armed with crackling energy emitters. They unfolded like metallic predators, their multifaceted optical sensors locking onto the human intruders. At the exact same moment, Eris's helmet display lit up with an urgent Priority 1 alert from orbit. It was a direct link to the Vengeance. "Thorn!" Commander Kale's voice was as cold and calm as ever, but it carried an undercurrent of something new, something akin to professional interest. "We have a problem. A massive energy signature is building on Veridian's primary moon. It's not a ship. It's a weapon. Looks like a wide-spectrum particle cannon, targeting the planet. Our hosts have come home to sterilize their lab experiment." On the ground, the Vex drones began to advance, their energy weapons whining as they charged. In orbit, a moon-sized gun was preparing to erase the entire planet from existence. They were trapped, hunted, and standing on ground zero of an impending planetary annihilation. Eris watched the drones advance, then keyed his comm. "Understood, Commander," he said, his own voice a perfect mirror of Kyle's calm. "The exterminator is early for his appointment. Keep him busy." Kale's reply was instantaneous, laced with a chilling, predatory amusement. "With pleasure, Doctor. It's time we introduced ourselves." The war for Veridian 7 had just begun. The Vex security drones attacked without a sound, their movements fluid and unnervingly silent. They glided across the floor of the hidden lab, a swarm of metallic insects intent on sterilizing the contamination that was Eris's team. Major Valerius's voice was a sharp crackle over the comms, a beacon of order in the rising chaos. "Contact front, open fire, suppressive patterns. Delta and Gamma, hold the line." The sterile confines of the lab erupted into a storm of violence. The percussive thumps of the X-ERC pulse rifles were deafening, each shot launching a magnetically accelerated slug that hit the drones with the force of a sledgehammer. Sparks flew as rounds ricocheted off the alien alloy, when the sheer volume of fire began to have an effect. The first drone staggered as multiple rounds slammed into its chassis, its energy emitter flickering before it collapsed in a heap of twitching metal limbs. "They're armored, but not invincible," Valerius shouted. "Focus fire on the joints, Vance." "How much longer?" Ilara Vance didn't look up from her work, her gloved fingers flying across the interface of the culture VATS control panel. The drones were a terrifying distraction, but the real threat was the ticking clock of the orbital cannon. "I'm bypassing their encryption. It's military grade, multi-layered. Give me 60 seconds. A drone slipped past the hail of gunfire, its energy weapon discharging a bolt of brilliant blue plasma. The shot slammed into one of Valerius's soldiers, enveloping him in a coruscating field of energy. His suit's internal dampeners flared, absorbing the worst of the impact, but the force of the blow sent him flying backward into a bank of equipment. "Man down," Valerius called out, her own rifle never ceasing its rhythmic thumping. "Keep them off, Dr. Vance." Eris was not a frontline soldier, but he was a commander. While Valerius orchestrated the desperate defense, he analyzed the enemy. The drones were efficient, attacking in coordinated waves when they lacked imagination. They were machines executing a program. "Valerius, they're funneling themselves through the main corridor between the stasis pods," he said, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "They're creating a bottleneck. Use it." Valerius didn't hesitate. "You heard the man, grenades EMP first. Then frags on my mark." A soldier pulled 2 grenades from his belt. The first, an EMP charge, sailed through the air and detonated with a silent flash of blue-white light. The advancing drones faltered, their systems momentarily scrambling. In that split second of confusion, the fragmentation grenade followed, exploding in a shower of superheated shrapnel that shredded the nearest machines. The temporary reprieve was all Vance needed. "Got it," she yelled, a small, cylindrical containment vial rising from a port on the culture vat. The vial glowed with a faint, sickly green light. It was the original strain of the Veridian plague, pure and uncut. "The sample is secure. Now how the hell do we get out of here?" The sealed blast door was their only exit, and it was impervious to their weapons. They were trapped in a kill box of their own making. Just as the remaining drones began to reboot their systems, Eris's comm crackled again. It was Commander Kyle. The background of his transmission was no longer silent. It was filled with the low thrum of a warship's bridge on high alert. "Doctor, a slight change of plans. The moon cannon is charging faster than anticipated. We can't allow it to fire. The Vengeance is moving to engage." In the void above Veridian 7, the silent dance of ghosts became a declaration of war. the jagged, black arrowhead of the Vengeance decloaked, its matte black hull suddenly shimmering into existence as it dropped its stealth field. It was a predator revealing itself, a shark rising from the depths. The concordant sensor buoys, which Kael's fleet had so carefully blinded, were now irrelevant. This was no longer a stealth mission. A Vex battle station, a massive, crescent-shaped weapon platform that had been disguised as Veridian's largest moon, registered the new threat. Its primary weapon, which had been slowly gathering energy to scour the planet's surface, began to retask, its colossal emitters shifting to lock on to the audacious human warship. Kael stood on his bridge, a stark, minimalist space where every crew member was a silent, efficient extension of his will. He watched the targeting data stream across the main view screen. "They're taking the bait," he said, his voice laced with a cold satisfaction. "All ships, decloak, execute Protocol Chimera." Across the system, 11 more black ships materialized from the void, not in a defensive formation, but in a predatory hunting pack. They were smaller and faster than the Vengeance, corvettes and frigates built for one purpose: to strike hard and disappear. The Vex battle station was a fortress, its hull bristling with point defense cannons and shield emitters. But it was a fortress designed to bombard a helpless planet, not to fight a coordinated fleet action. Kael's fleet was a pack of wolves, and the moon-sized gun was a lumbering bear. On the planet's surface, the team felt the battle begin as a series of low-frequency tremors that vibrated up through the soles of their boots. A new sound filled the air, with a resonant hum that seemed to come from the sky itself. "What is that?" Valerius asked, reloading her rifle. "That," Eris replied, a grim smile touching his lips, "is the cavalry." A new message flashed on his HUD. It was a single data packet from the Solace, a schematic of the hospital, with a new route highlighted in green, leading from their position to a subterranean maintenance conduit that bypassed the sealed doors and led directly to the surface. It was their escape route. "Captain Petrova has found us a way out," Eris announced. "Let's move, Valerius. Rear guard." The team scrambled towards the new route, a service panel hidden behind a bank of destroyed Vex equipment. As the last of Valerius's soldiers slipped through the narrow opening, a section of the lab ceiling imploded inwards. A beam of incandescent energy, an orbital lance from one of the Black Fleet ships, had pierced through meters of rock and alien alloy to strike the lab, vaporizing the remaining drones and the Vex technology with them. The message was clear. Task Force Cerberus was cleaning up, leaving no evidence of their presence behind. They navigated the cramped, dark maintenance tunnels, the sounds of the orbital battle growing louder with every step. The entire planet seemed to be shaking now, a groaning, protesting thing caught in the crossfire of gods. They emerged into the putrid air of Oak Haven, the sky above them a terrifying canvas of silent, strobing lights and blossoming fireballs. The Vengeance was a specter of death, weaving through the torrent of plasma fire erupting from the Vex station. Its spinal mass driver, a weapon that the Concordants had outlawed centuries ago, fired slugs the size of shuttlecraft at near light speed. Each impact was a miniature apocalypse, tearing through the station's shields and armor like they were tissue paper. The smaller frigates of the Black Fleet danced at the edges of the fight, their torpedoes and railguns targeting the station's shield generators and weapon emplacements with brutal, surgical precision. But the Vex were not idle. Swarms of fighter drones, the same type they had faced in the lab but larger and more heavily armed, poured from the station's hangars, engaging the human ships in a dizzying, three-dimensional dogfight. From the central plaza, Eris and his team could only watch in awe and terror. The battle was silent. the vacuum of space swallowing the sound of the titanic explosions. But the light show was blinding. "Our ride is on its way," Eris said, shielding his eyes as one of the Vex drones was blasted out of the sky by a Terran frigate, its burning corpse streaking across the atmosphere like a malevolent meteor. The stiletto dropship descended through the chaos, its hull plating glowing red from the heat of the ongoing battle. It landed hard, but its ramp slamming down before the landing struts had even fully compressed. "Get in now!" the pilot's voice screamed over the comms. They scrambled aboard, the ramp rising behind them just as a stray plasma bolt impacted the plaza where they had been standing, turning the organic slurry into a crater of incandescent glass. As the stiletto clawed its way back toward the relative safety of the Solace, Eris watched the battle for Veridian 7 reach its climax. Commander Kael, having drawn the station's full attention and crippled its primary defenses, had made his final move. The Vengeance powered straight towards the colossal particle cannon, ignoring the hundreds of point defense batteries that hammered its shields. It was a suicide run. Then, at the last possible second, it vented a massive cloud of plasma from its engines and fired its retro thrusters, sending the warship into a gut-wrenching spin. The move exposed its underbelly, revealing a weapon Eris had only ever seen in classified schematics. It was a gravity lance, a theoretical weapon that bent space-time itself. A beam of pure, shimmering distortion erupted from the Vengeance, not a projectile of light or energy, but a wave of physical reality being torn asunder. The beam struck the Vex station not with an explosion, but with a sickening crunch. The massive structure buckled, twisted, and then collapsed in on itself, pulled apart by its own mass as the laws of physics were momentarily suspended. The station, the moon it was built into, and the swarms of Vex drones were annihilated in an instant of silent, gravitational violence. The sky over Veridian 7 was clear once more. The stiletto docked with the Solace, the team stumbling out of the dropship. Exhausted, but alive, Vance clutched the containment vial to her chest as if it were her own child. Eris walked straight to the bridge. The main view screen showed the Black Fleet, their work done, already beginning to fade back into the void, their stealth drives re-engaging. A final encrypted message appeared on his console from Kael. "Threat neutralized. We have their location. Waiting for your analysis, Doctor. The cure is ready to be administered." Eris looked from the message to the containment vial in Vance's hands, then back to the dead, scarred world on the screen. He had his evidence. Now, the trial could begin, and the sentence, he knew, would be death. The journey back to the XHS Solace was a climb from one circle of hell to another. The visceral, immediate horror of the Vex Lab gave way to the cold, intellectual dread of the mission's next phase. On the bridge, the adrenaline of the ground mission and the orbital battle began to recede, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. Major Valerius and her team were already in post-op debriefing and decontamination. Their part in this grim play concluded for now. Dr. Vance was sequestered in the ship's Level 4 biolab. The containment vial with the fate of a species inside it already connected to the ship's quantum diagnostic core. Eris Thorne stood alone on the observation deck, a curved space of reinforced titanium glass that looked out upon the silent, ravaged sphere of Veridian 7. The Black Fleet had vanished as quickly as it had appeared, their stealth drives cloaking them once more in the impenetrable blackness of the void. They were out there, a pack of silent wolves, waiting for him to point them toward their prey. He was a doctor. His entire life, his entire being, was built around a single, foundational principle primum non nocere. First, do no harm. He had dissected viruses, healed wounds, and fought plagues on a dozen worlds. He had held the hands of the dying and delivered new life. Now, he was poised to commit genocide. The door hissed open behind him. It was Captain Petrova, her face drawn and tired. She held 2 mugs, the steam rising from them carrying the familiar, bitter scent of Terran coffee. "Thought you could use this," she said, handing one to him. He took it. The warmth, a small, grounding comfort in the sterile coldness of the ship. "Any word from Vance?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the dead world below. "She's locked in," Petrova replied. "The quantum computer is running the final decryption sequences. The Vex layered this thing with so many anti-tampering codes and genetic obfuscations that it's taking the ship's entire processing power to unravel it without denaturing the sample. She said she'll have the source signature within the hour." They stood in silence for a long moment, the only sound the low hum of the ship's life support. "They never stood a chance, did they?" Petrova murmured, her gaze following his. 2 million people. They died because they were convenient. Eris took a slow sip of the coffee. The bitterness was sharp on his tongue. "They died because we were naive. Lena, the whole galaxy was. We signed treaties. We built councils. We pretended that civility was the natural state of the universe. We forgot that for some species, the only law is the hunt, and the only diplomacy is a sharp set of teeth. The Aegis Mandate was written for days like this." Petrova looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "And you're the one who has to invoke it. Is that a burden a doctor is meant to carry?" Eris finally turned away from the window, his expression carved from stone. "A doctor's burden is to excise the cancer before it kills the patient. Sometimes the cancer is a species." The summons came 45 minutes later. When Eris entered the Level 4 lab, the scene gave him pause. The room was a cathedral of science. All gleaming white surfaces and softly glowing blue interfaces. In the center, a holographic sphere of unimaginable complexity rotated slowly. It was the Veridian plague, its genetic structure laid bare. Alara Vance stood before it, her helmet off, her face pale and glistening with a sheen of sweat. She wasn't looking at the hologram with the triumphant gaze of a scientist who had solved a puzzle, but with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. "What is it?" "Ilara," Eris asked, his voice gentle. "What did you find?" Vance gestured a trembling hand toward the model. "It's not just a virus. Eris, we were wrong. A virus is a blunt instrument. This is a scalpel. It's a nanite-infused retrovirus, designed to do more than just kill." She manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a specific protein chain that shimmered with an unnatural, metallic light. It doesn't just dissolve organic matter. It deconstructs it, reads it, and catalogs it on a quantum level. Every strand of DNA, every neural pathway, every memory. It was all recorded before it was destroyed. Eris felt a cold dread begin to seep into his bones. "Recorded for what?" "For this," she whispered. And with a final command, she isolated the virus's core payload, the part that had been hidden beneath all the layers of encryption. The holographic model shifted, the complex viral structure dissolving to reveal a single, elegant strand of DNA. It was not human. It was Vex. But it was incomplete. There were gaps in its sequence, empty slots waiting to be filled. "It's a template," Vance said, her voice barely audible. "The plague was a delivery system for a genetic harvester. The Vex weren't just exterminating the colony. They were analyzing them, looking for specific traits, our adaptability. our resilience, our capacity for creative thought. They were harvesting our genetic code to splice it into their own. They're not just conquerors, they air it. They're parasites. They want to consume us, to make the best parts of us their own and discard the rest. The full implication of her discovery washed over Eris like a tide of ice water. This was not an act of war. This was an act of consumption. The 2 million dead on Veridian 7 were not casualties. They were a harvest. Humanity wasn't an enemy to the Vex. It was a resource. The Aegis Mandate was no longer just a policy of retribution. It was a protocol for existential self-defense. The patient was the entire human race. And the cancer was a species that saw them as cattle. A soft chime echoed through the lab. A Priority 1 communication request. A holographic projector on the central console flickered to life, coalescing into the life-sized image of Commander Jorik Kael. He stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, the background still in silent, his face half-shadowed and marked by a thin, jagged scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, was an impassive mask. His eyes, the color of a winter storm, locked onto Eris. "Dr. Thorne." His voice was a low rumble, devoid of inflection. "Your hour is up. I trust Dr. Vance's work has been fruitful. We have the origin point of the Vex command signal triangulated to the Tethys Abyss, a dark nebula on the edge of the galactic rim, a perfect place to hide. All I require is the genetic key from your sample to confirm the target signature. My fleet is ready to administer the cure." Eris looked from Kael's cold, expectant face to Vance's horrified one, and then to the monstrously elegant strand of Vex DNA hanging in the air between them. He had his proof, his justification. He had the full weight of the Aegis Mandate behind him. And yet, he hesitated. The doctor in him, the healer, screamed in silent protest. "What we are about to do, Commander, it will change us," Eris said, his voice heavy. "We are about to commit an act that the Concordance would label the greatest atrocity in recorded history." Kael's expression did not change, but a flicker of something contempt perhaps passed through his eyes. "The Concordance is a collection of fools who believe that predators can be reasoned with. They sat by and watched your 2 million colonists be rendered into genetic soup. Their opinion is less than worthless. History is written by the survivors. Doctor, the only thing that will change is that humanity will continue to have a future. My oath was to preserve life." Eris pushed back, the words feeling hollow even as he said them. "And theirs is to consume it." Kael countered, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Your oath ends where their appetite begins. They started this. They defined the terms of this conflict the moment they designed this plague. They declared that our very biology was a resource to be plundered. Our response is not an atrocity. It is a biological imperative. It is survival." Eris looked at the Vex DNA template. He saw the gaps, the empty spaces they intended to fill with the stolen essence of his people. He saw the 2 million souls of Veridian 7 not just murdered, but cannibalized on a genetic level. Kael was right. This was not war. This was pest control. The doctor in him finally fell silent, replaced by the grim, cold resolve of the commander. The cancer had been identified. The surgery had to be performed. He gave a curt nod to Vance, who, with a look of profound sorrow, transmitted the encrypted data packet containing the plague's source signature and the Vex genetic key. Eris watched the progress bar fill on his console, then turned his full attention back to the hologram of the waiting executioner. "Commander Kael," he said, his voice now stripped of all doubt, as cold and absolute as the void itself. I have confirmed the nature of the Vex threat by the authority granted to me under the Xenobiological Emergency Response Corps Charter, Section Alpha. I am formally invoking the Aegis Mandate." He took a deep breath, the finality of his next words settling upon him like a shroud. "You have your target confirmation. The cure is authorized. Erase them from the stars." Kael's lips curled into the barest hint of a smile. It was a terrifying sight. "With pleasure, Doctor," he said, and his image vanished. The war was over. The extermination was about to begin. The order was given. The cure was authorized. On the bridge of the XHS Solace, a profound and heavy stillness settled over the crew. The sounds of the ship, the whisper of recycled air, the soft chime of a completed diagnostic, the low thrum of the quantum core seemed amplified in the sudden absence of purpose. They were now spectators, waiting for a verdict to be carried out light years away. In the Level 4 biolab, Eris Thorne watched the hologram of Commander Kael vanish, leaving only the ghost-like image of the Vex DNA template rotating in the silent air. Alara Vance was slumped in a chair, her face buried in her hands. She was a geneticist, a creator, a woman who saw life as a sacred text. She had just provided the footnotes for its complete and utter desecration. We just sentenced an entire species to death," she whispered, her voice muffled. "An entire civilization, billions of lives." Eris walked over to the main console, his movement stiff, deliberate. He brought up the long-range sensor feed, linking it to the encrypted battle data being relayed from the Vengeance. A star chart of the Tethys Abyss materialized, a swirling nebula of dark gas and infant stars. A single system within it was now highlighted in crimson. "They stopped being a civilization the moment they decided our people were raw materials," Eris said, his voice a low, a rough thing that didn't sound like his own. "They forfeited their right to exist when they defined existence as a predatory act, Barndates. We are not sentencing them. We are cauterizing a wound to save the body of the galaxy." It was a commander's logic, cold and necessary, but the doctor in him felt every word like a betrayal of his oath. In the Tethys Abyss, Task Force Cerberus moved not as a fleet, but as a single coordinated organism of destruction. 12 black ships, invisible to all conventional sensors, formed a perfect sphere around the Vex home system. At its heart was a yellow dwarf star, orbited by 3 planets. The innermost was a molten rock, the outermost a gas giant. The second planet, Vex Prime, was a jewel of alien biology, its surface a sprawling, crystalline metropolis that pulsed with the collective energy of its hyper-advanced, hive-minded populace. Commander Yorick Kael stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, his face illuminated by the tactical display. He was not watching a planet. He was watching a target. "The cure is primed," his weapons officer reported, his voice as flat and emotionless as his commander's. "Genetic signature confirmed and locked. Ready to disperse on your command." Kael did not reply for a long moment. He simply watched the thriving world, a world that had no idea that its final seconds were ticking away. He felt no hatred, no anger, no satisfaction. He felt only the cold, clean purity of purpose. This was the culmination of his life, the reason the Black Fleet was forged in secret. It was to be the scalpel that excised the galaxy's malignancies. "Administer the cure," he commanded. There were no torpedoes, no lance strikes, no cataclysmic explosions. From the belly of the Vengeance and each of its 11 sister ships, a single, specialized missile was launched. They moved with unnatural speed. their drives leaving no thermal or energy trail. They were not weapons of war, but instruments of biology. As they reached the upper atmosphere of Vex Prime, they did not detonate. They dispersed. A fine, glittering aerosol, invisible to the naked eye, began to fall like a silent, deadly rain upon the crystalline cities below. It was the Aegis Mandate made manifest. It was a retroviral phage, engineered by humanity's darkest and most brilliant minds. It was designed to do one thing, using the very genetic key that Dr. Vance had extracted. It targeted the unique protein folding sequence in Vex DNA, the very foundation of their biology. It was not a poison. It was a catalyst. The phage spread with terrifying efficiency, carried on the winds, absorbed into the planet's intricate network of nutrient conduits. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. The Vex, a species that communicated via a sophisticated blend of telepathy and bioluminescence, registered the foreign agent, but classified it as an inert atmospheric anomaly. Then, the first Vex citizen, a bioengineer in a spire overlooking the capital, felt a strange, internal tremor. Its crystalline body, a marvel of biological engineering, suddenly lost its structural integrity. The intricate lattice of its cells unwound, the proteins denaturing in a cascade of biological failure. It collapsed, not into a corpse, but into a pool of shimmering, organic fluid. On the bridge of the Solace, they watched the horror unfold through the cold, impartial eyes of their sensors. The planetary biomass reading for Vex Prime, which had been a complex tapestry of billions of distinct life signs, began to change. The intricate patterns wavered, then blurred, then began to merge. "My God," Captain Petrova breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "What's happening?" "The cure," Aris stated, his voice a dead monotone as he analyzed the data. "It's not killing them. It's unmaking them. It's a forced biological regression. It's turning their entire species, their entire planet, into the primordial soup from which it evolved." The liquefaction spread like a wave across the planet. The crystalline cities, which were themselves semi-organic, dissolved alongside their creators in under an hour. Every Vex, every one of their strange, bioengineered creatures, every alien plant, all of it ceased to exist. The billions of distinct life signs merged into one single, homogeneous reading. Vex Prime was no longer a planet of cities and people. It was an ocean world, its surface covered entirely by a thick, viscous sea of organic slurry. The silence that fell upon the Solace's bridge was more profound than any sound. They had not just destroyed a species, they had erased them, editing them out of the book of life, leaving behind nothing but the raw, undifferentiated ink. A single, encrypted message appeared on Eris's console. It was from Kael. "The cure has been administered. The patient has expired." Days later, the XHS Solace was back in the Sol system, its mission complete. The grief for Veridian 7 was still raw across the Federation, but it was now mingled with a strange, unspoken current of grim satisfaction. The official story was that the Concordance had located the source of the plague and taken decisive, classified action. No one knew the truth, except for the handful of people who now had to live with it. Aris Thorn stood once more in the subterranean bunker beneath the Siberian tundra, giving his final report to Admiral Iva Rostova. The room was the same, but he was not. He felt older, hollowed out. And with the dispersal of the counteragent, the Vex threat was permanently neutralized. He concluded, his voice a dry rasp. "The Aegis Mandate was fulfilled." Rostova listened, her expression unreadable. When he was finished, she simply nodded. "You have done your duty, Doctor. You have saved our species from a threat it was not prepared to face." "I committed genocide, Admiral," Eris said, the words tasting like ash. "I used a plague to cure a plague. The man who went on this mission is not the man standing before you now." For the first time, Rostova's iron demeanor softened. "Just a fraction. The galaxy is a dark and dangerous place. Eris, to be a sheep in a forest of wolves is to be meat. Today, we taught the wolves that we have teeth of our own, teeth they never imagined. The Concordance is already in an uproar. Our parting gift to the Vex system was an anonymous data burst containing all of Dr. Vance's findings, the truth about the plague, the genetic harvesting, everything. It was delivered to every major species on the Citadel." "You told them what the Vex did?" Eris asked. Surprised. "Yes," Rostova confirmed. "And then we sent them a second data burst." A new file appeared on the main screen. It was a sensor log, a recording of the final hour of Vex Prime, showing the biomass signatures dissolving into a single planetary soup. There was no explanation, no claim of responsibility, just the raw, terrifying data. "We showed them what we did," Rostova said, her voice dropping to a low, chilling whisper. "Let them debate. Let them condemn us. Let them fear us. From this day forward, when a species looks at humanity, they will no longer see a fractured, emotional race of upstarts. They will see the species that erased the Vex from existence. They will see a people who will answer an attack on their biology not with warships, but with extinction. Fear is the greatest shield we have ever known, Eris, and you have just polished it to a mirror sheen." Eris left the bunker and returned to the quiet solitude of his quarters. He had been a doctor, a man of science and healing. Now he was something else, a protector, a commander, a mass murderer, an arbiter of existential justice. He looked at his hands, the hands that had stitched wounds and delivered babies. They had signed a death warrant for a species. The silence of Veridian 7 had been answered with the silence of Vex Prime. It was a perfect, terrible symmetry. He knew that humanity would survive, would grow stronger, would carve out a new and formidable place for itself among the stars. But he also knew the cost. To survive in the void, humanity had to embrace a piece of the void itself, a cold, absolute, and merciless resolve. The age of innocence was over. The age of the cure had begun. And he, Dr. Eris Thorne, the man who had administered it, would forever be haunted by the silence that followed.